Hey, this is Glenn Rogers, guitarist of Primal, Deliverance, and former member of Heretic, and you're experiencing Poppet's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Poppet's Corner. I'm thoroughly excited to be tackling this topic today. I've kind of always wanted to do this, and I have the best of the best with me here to help inform me a little bit more on this specific topic. But I'd like to please welcome Mr. Shannon Fry and, of course, the great Matt Hartnett of Aftershocks TV. Guys, how you doing? Thanks again for coming on and hanging.
Yeah, good. Good to have Matt.
Yeah, great to
Oh
see you
yeah.
guys again. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Now, what kind of sparked this whole topic was just me kind of scrolling through some comments of because Ozzy Osbourne has retired essentially from touring, and I kept seeing a lot of like comments that from people that were kind of bummed, and I started to ask myself, I'm like, why as fans do we want to or like seeing our heroes die on stage? Like that we don't like seeing our heroes retire at all. And it's only for some reason in metal, and I don't understand why. Because I don't want to see a 74-year-old Ozzy Osbourne. Like, I'm happy he's retiring, but I kept seeing comments of just people being bummed. So I want to kind of go around the table here and just get your guys' thoughts on this. Maybe we can branch into other different types of territories.
Well, I guess I'll start off. I don't like seeing it. I don't like it when they're that old. Sure, it's cool that they're still doing it to a point because it's what they've done for so long. But at the same time, Ozzy to me hasn't been very good in 20 years. So he should have retired when the No More Tours tour happened in 92. He should have stopped then. But you know, things happen and he came back. But Kiss is another band. They're on their third farewell tour now, and like, is how long is that going to go? And Paul Stanley can't sing no more. Gene Simmons can't really sing much anymore. It's bad, but I don't understand why people want to keep seeing them. I don't understand that, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like you guys. Once I think bands guys hit around their mid 60s and get close to 70. It's to me, it's like I mean, it's time to kind of get ready to wrap it up. I will say though, I mean, it's not just metal. I mean, classic rock. Obviously, you still see the Who, you still see the Stones. Those guys are still out there. Paul McCartney's still playing. Some guys, I can do it at a high level still at an older age. But in terms of metal, yeah, because of the extremity of the music and in terms, just because it's a faster and tougher, pretty not to say tougher, but it's faster at least to play with a lot of the old metal bands. I think when you get to a certain age, I'm like you guys, I don't want to see it. But I think with someone like Ozzy, I think it's a little different too because obviously he's got such an iconic voice. I mean, he's been able to at least he's not Don Dokken at least out there, where you really I mean he sounds like utter shit, but yes, he definitely doesn't sound like the Ozzy that we all remember and love, from all those years going back 40, 50 years now. But I think with him, it's a different thing because it's sort of, I mean, right? I mean, Sabbath is where it all started with Ozzy, and so for him, I think to retire, it gives it a little extra kind of, people a little bit more upset about it or disappointed that he's retiring. My main question is why, when we see there's so many people, like you said, that just want to see their heroes, musical heroes, just play until, like you said, the day they drop dead. I think a lot of it, there's a couple of reasons for that. I think one of the reasons, obviously, is nostalgia, right? People look at music as it's a timeline of their life, right? It reminds them of points in their life. And so I think when people get older, they stop looking for new things. I mean, we're kind of different, I think, when it comes to music. We all, no matter how old we are, we're always going to love looking for new bands and music. And those, that's just how we are. But majority of music fans, right? I would say a good 80 to 90% easily just aren't like us. They're not really into the weeds of things. They're not so geeked out about all this stuff. To them, it's entertainment. So to them, it's like, okay, I like to work and I want to go see, a Metallica, or I want to see Ozzy, see Ozfest, or whatever it is. Want to see, they want to know that that's coming all the time and that they have that to go and watch. I mean, it's sort of like people, for instance, if you want to look at like movies, okay, so look at music compared to movies. It's like Star Wars. All right, there hasn't been a good Star Wars in how long? Yet they keep pumping them out, and people keep getting all geeked up and jumped up to go celebrate and go see the new Star Wars. And they keep coming up with all these different, parties or whatever it is. It's just people are nostalgic in general, and they're force-fed music. And so they don't know anything new, and they don't go looking for anything new. So they only know whatever's out there. And obviously Ozzy has been on the radio. He's been everywhere, really, for how long? So he's just such a household name. And obviously being such a legit voice for metal to in the beginning, I think that's just one of the reasons why maybe he's being mourned a little more than some others might be if they're in their mid-70s. But yeah, I'm with you guys though. Yeah, I think it's 74 is way too old anyway, in my opinion. But
Well, okay, I gotta kind of challenge you on this point here, because you're talking about a brand. So, okay, if we're gonna do brand versus brand, we can do that. I think what you need to add in some context where they get the same actors in Star Wars to play the same characters in every movie. That would make sense to your point. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's the same. Like, I don't want to see a fucking 80-year-old Harrison Ford playing Han Solo. I just don't. It doesn't do anything for me. And I don't want to see a 74-year-old Ozzy Osbourne try and slug it out. Just like I don't want to see a fucking fat Vince Neil on the third fucking farewell tour singing every third word. I don't care enough about it. I don't want to see Joe Elliott struggle. I don't want to see fucking Don Dawkins struggle.
But that's you, right? Yeah. I mean, yeah. But
Like,
what I'm trying to say is the majority of people do,
it's
unfortunately.
fucking weird. That's
Well,
weird.
I think what it is, it's just like I was saying, we're also living in a time of nostalgia where old music is more popular than new music. So really, old music and old forms of entertainment in general are the big thing now. There's the older people can't relate to what's going on that's new. So the one who can relate that to new things are the young generation, music fans. Young generation music fans, yeah, they're not going to go out and buy, like with Metallica and pay $200-300 for a show, ticket, right? But then that's what's happening. A lot of these bands or these whatever, they're not anymore even marketing or to younger audiences, because they know where the money's at, and that's what the older audience, they're going to pay that money. There's not a lot of money, especially with entertainment, especially music, obviously, with younger audiences, because they're not going to go out and buy the CDs and the vinyls and the shirts, where the older crowd will. And that's why nostalgia now is king, because that's where they're going to market to. They're going to market to the old crowd that has the money to spend. And so, and I was just using obviously Star Wars. It's just sort of a comparison where just people after a certain age, they just stop looking for new things, because they start thinking, this is the twilight of my year. They start thinking about their past, and they start, they just kind of stop. You know what I mean? Unfortunately. And of course, like, we're not like that, but that's a good 80-90% of people I think you run into, especially when it comes to music. There's not many people like us who just want to keep hearing new stuff all the time. It just doesn't. We're the oddballs.
Well, the thing is, not saying that the Star Wars reference is bad. I'm just saying let's use the same actors, not it as a brand. I'm talking about like the same actors. Like, do you really want to see Mark Hamill play Luke Skywalker until the day he dies? Because I don't.
Some people probably do.
But here's the thing: what they're doing is they're rebranding that to a new audience and having younger actors play. That's fine, because it continues the story. I get that. What I don't
So
get
don't you think that will happen with? Don't you think that the next logical step then would be tribute acts and impersonations?
Yeah, with a good name. Yeah, I could see it. Well, the thing
Well,
is
okay. Yeah.
sorry, but to go off of everybody's point here is Hollywood and music in general pushes for the older audience only. Like they don't invest in new artists, and what you're seeing is the downfall of the music industry, primarily because of that. Because they're not investing in the next generation that's going to carry on the torch. They're investing in the short term gain, which is like the hits today, and they're gone tomorrow kind of thing. The new artists that if you don't have a hit, you're fucked the first time around. When before they would invest some money into a new artist and they would have 4 or 5 albums before that hit. What they did in like the 70s and 80s, and it's the complete opposite now. And what you're seeing is the result of that, in my opinion, is just the downfall of the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've done it to themselves.
Well, what you're seeing is an industry that's been running on a broken model for the last 2 decades, is what you're seeing. And what happens is, yes, they're not gonna risk spending money into new music and new bands because they know how much money that is. It's not the 80s or 90s where there's just so much money in the industry and they're making $20 a CD and they just have all this money to throw around. So obviously, I think we had an episode we did on this one time, but obviously, because it's on a broken model, okay, well, what's going to happen then? They're using the same model. Well, where's the money going to come from? Because it's obviously not as lucrative as it once was. Well, they're going to keep making the money, as we all know. They just keep taking away from the artists, or they stop doing what they've been doing the last 2 decades, which is there's no more artist development. And so all they're doing now is they're going, okay, well, we've got 40 years here of rock and metal history, and we've got so many of these bands that are still going. We'll just, like you said, rebrand them, remarket them, and put them, and just keep throwing them back out there. They're familiar. They're not going to cost us as much risk involved. They know their audience. They know they've got an audience, right? So there's this days, if you're going to get signed, you already have to have your own audience to even be considered to be signed. They're not going to develop talent, as we've been saying. So that is the downfall of the music business. It's been running on a broken model for 20 years with the 3 or 4 guys who run the whole business, globally, who have no intentions to change that because they'll know they'll be dead and gone by the time, their whatever runs out. They've got enough artists. They've still got a Metallica. And now, obviously whatever they're going to come up with next, that'll carry at least for 10 more years. They got the Foo Fighters next, or whoever it is next. They'll just keep riding that train until they're gone. They're not worried about replenishing and a music scene or anything like that. They just care about one thing, and that's the bottom line, their money. And like I said, on a broken business model. So,
and one day that money is going to be dead and gone. By the way, it's like there's going to be a certain point when all of our artists are dead and gone, and then what's going to happen? You're going to have 2 options: AI, or you're going to have sons or whatever it is, the next generation of those people in this. I mean, I feel that could potentially happen. You're going to have James Hetfield's son playing James Hetfield in Metallica and keeping that brand alive. I just don't see it like I don't see a point, I guess, where new bands are going to reign supreme again. I just don't see that at this point. And so it's kind of a bummer thing because you only have certain people that are like promoting new bands, even like us. That, again, is probably the reason why that we're in the predicament that we're in. So what do you guys think is going to happen in the next 10 years? Because the average age of Metallica is 60. It's not 50. It's not 40. It's 60. And so they're not going to be playing thrash metal in their 70s. I just don't see that happening.
They don't play thrash metal now. I'm fucking retarded. No, I think what you're saying, that chance of the new generation won't happen in my lifetime at all. I can say that right now. But I can see how, for example, I've heard this talked about. I don't know how true it is, but how rumors are that Kiss is going to choose different members to play their character to continue on the legacy of Kiss. I can see that happening, as well as these tribute bands becoming some, like, look at the Iron Maidens. Like, as soon as Iron Maiden's gone, the Iron Maidens are the fucking next thing, right? That's how I see it. The next, when Judas Priest is gone, there'll be some band that takes Judas Priest's torch, whether they choose those members or not. Possibly another tribute band, which I haven't seen any good ones yet, but possibly a good Judas Priest tribute band to keep carrying on the legacy. The problem is there'll be no new albums from those bands. It's up to this generation that's happening right now, right, from this day and age to keep carrying the torch, but whether or not people buy it, that's a different story. I don't know. That's where I'm at, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, yeah, like you said, I remember hearing about that too with Kiss, wanting to continue on with no original band members, and those guys are dead. And you're right. I mean, you're right. I could see, Hetfield's son taking over for Hetfield and being the lead singer of Metallica or whatever it may be. Because I think we got to remember too. I mean, it's never going to go back. I mean, it took me a while to get to this, to admit it, but it's never going to go back to where it once was. And there's so many reasons because of it. Not, obviously just because the way music's consumed too is just so different. But also, metal's it's not new anymore, right? So it's now old. And now, of course, rap and hip hop are old and it's as big as ever. Well, that's because the business, they know they can control those people. They're not bands, they're solo artists, they're individuals, so they're easy to control. And they, they could just keep repackaging all that junk. It's easy to make, it's cheap to make. And that's why they stick with that. And I hate to say it, but a lot you get these young kids that really aren't very educated and they're easy just to control. So they'll keep with that formula as long as people are still consuming and buying that music. But with rock and metal, like I said, it's not, if you look at classical music or jazz or all the older music that was so popular had its heyday for a good 20 years plus or so forth. I mean, I look at metal and I think that's what it is. It had its good run in the 80s and the 90s, part of the 90s, a little bit of it, and then the 2000s it kind of came back to, had its time. It's always going to be there. Obviously there's always going to be rock and metal, but yeah, it's never going to be what it once was. To be honest with you, I like that. I don't want it to be mainstream. I mean, to me, metal was never really supposed to be mainstream. I used to hate when it was like, Metallica, oh, we're ambassadors, we for metal, we're bringing it to the world. We don't need that. I don't want metal all over the place. It's supposed to be the antithesis of mainstream. And yet here it is. They want to make it mainstream. And I don't. So I'm glad in a lot of ways that it is the way it is right now. It's fan driven. It's going back to the underground and to the clubs where it belongs. And so to me, if people want to sit there and pay $500 for nosebleed seats to see a hologram, freaking Metallica or whoever it is, Dio or whatever, be my guest. Go ahead and waste your money on that crap. I'll be sitting watching that new band that not many people have heard of. That's only 50 to 100 people in that club. That's where I'll be. And, that's where I'll be happy. And so I just look at his dad as like, what? I think we as metal fans, I think, we kind of we hope that it'll have this resurgence that it want, to the point where it once was, 20 plus years ago. But the reality is it's probably not going to be, and not at least here in the US. I don't see it happening because of, it's not radio friendly. It's not, kids don't want to pick up instruments and learn it. It's just easy to get on a turntable and be a quote unquote rock star that way instead of learning an instrument. So that's my take on that.
I think we're all like too stubborn to see our heroes go. I think that's my main answer for why we want to see him die on stage. We have an infatuation with wanting to see our heroes just play until they die, till they keel over. And I think it's because we don't want to give them up. But at some point, the hardest part is letting go. It is. It really is.
And well, it's the artist himself, right? That don't want to let go. I mean, I think we're just pull. Of course, if you got an artist and you love them, if they keep going, you want to pull for them. Of course, it's really them that don't want to let it go. And I understand that it's their passion, it's something they've done their whole lives. It's music, and it's understandable. But I think there is a time, yes, when if they're not performing Like, and I'm using him again, like a Don Dokken. I mean, you cannot perform and ruin your legacy like that up there. Even if you're getting paid for it, people are still willing to pay for it too. That's the thing. People are willing to go see, even though they know it's going to be shit. They're paying for nostalgia because to them it's just like they're afraid that yes, might be the last time I could see my hero, so I got to go see it. And then even though they keep coming around, they still think, well, this might be it. And so that's another reason why they keep paying to see them all the time, because they keep thinking it's the last time. But as we know, it seems to be the good ones always seem to retire, and the bad ones seem to hang around. Is what it seems like to me.
Well, so do you think people still pay for that to kind of want to get a second wave of what they felt like when they saw that artist 40 years ago? Is that like
nostalgia?
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. It's another way of saying nostalgia. Yeah. Okay. So then it becomes what's next. So let's say metal is now in the underground only. What's next?
It stays there.
Okay. Wait.
Yeah.
Wait. Great. So let's. I'm gonna compare. This is a fine comparison. I'm gonna compare metal to jazz then, right? Because jazz at one point was like the king of music. I mean, literally every music was jazz. Christmas songs, anything from the 50s and 40s, big band stuff. It reached a certain point until like I'm gonna say the 60s. I think that was like the last time maybe that jazz was like super popular, and then became prog and rock, and just became from that whole thing. So that went back into the underground, and now it's just, if you like jazz, you're into it. If you're into metal, you're into it, and then there's no room to grow from there. That's my kind of I'm kind of nervous for that. Like, so we're not going to be able to grow the genre and push it forward. It's just going to be this once great thing, and now it's just for the hardcore fans that are just into it, and that's it. It's not going to grow past that.
I think that's where it's headed.
And so it'll die on the vine. It'll just die. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sucks to say,
because
man.
it's the same thing with, okay, look, let's go back even further. Well, not quite further, but the doo-wop aspect of music, that was 6-7 years gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it kind of made this resurgence in the early 90s, kind of with Boys to Men and that kind of crap. But the jazz thing, it went to a certain point, gone, right? But it all stayed to this niche movement, this niche crowd. And I think that's what's going to happen. And plus, look at metal right now, okay? There's the most saturated genre I think there is in the world, because not only are people recording by themselves at home with a guitar, programmed drums, they hire somebody to do the vocals, done. There you are. Well, now there's so many bands like this, it's also preventing it from having that next bigger band, right? There's that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. There's a huge influx of these 1 and 2 women bands, which, like you said, I mean, and I'm just not I'm just not a huge fan of that. I just, it's because, like you said, you can't, and I've seen some of the bands try to do it live, and it doesn't, work with 2 people up there on stage with metal and hard rock and metal. Yeah, no, I agree with Shannon 100%. I think it's just going to be yeah, exactly. It's just going to be a niche thing, like it started out as. Like most, I mean, you should think about it, most genres just start out that way, or did start out that way. And, back then when labels had the money and they were looking to find the new thing, yeah, they throw money at all these different things just to see what was going to happen. They see what was, taking hold with a lot of the youth. And that's where their money would go into. And then, like I said, they never knew what they were doing. They would just throw money, especially like in the 90s, you look at it like Seattle and stuff, right? Well, Sub Pop just basically discovered all their bands for them, out of Seattle. You know, it wasn't like they went in there and they did all the grunt work. So they just found out a long time, just throw money at shit and we'll get it. You know, but obviously it doesn't. They can't do that anymore. And so so because of that, yes, it's going to go right back to the underground, and just like you said, jazz did, just like classical music, just like every, like you said, big band, all those big genres back in the day, ragtime, all those sounds, all had their time and place. But of course, when and there was of course bands still playing it. I mean, who knows? We might be, 20 years from now, we might, it might be like you said, like a polka doo-wop, one of those kind of things, where there's hardly nobody, listening to it. I mean, I hope not. I don't think so. I think rock in general is going to be, always there. I think it's passionate enough, rock and metal for fans to keep it going. But once again, with kids not picking up instruments still, that's a big thing. For years, kids picked up instruments left and right. It didn't matter if they got into rock, metal, jazz, whatever it may be. They at least got into some sort of music that they can play, funk, soul, all that stuff. All those genres too, down the drain. Everything is just electronic. And like you said, they're making music from the bedroom, and they're. I mean, look at what last year, whatever, a couple of years ago, the top, it was like the number one hit of all time, selling hit, that Little Nas X dude, and that song. And that guy just made it. It was a SoundCloud beat.
Mm-hmm.
He bought it for $15. So it's like like you said, music's just so devalued. So yes, it's just going to be niche. And like I said, I'm fine with that. I'm. It's not going to be lucrative. I don't think a lot of bands are going to be able to obviously make a great living doing it. But at least it's honest and it's done for the love of it. Maybe the quality is not going to be as it once was, because you don't have that artist development money coming in, and people have to work, and you're not going to be able to put as much time into the artistry and craft. But I think it's going to be, as fans, I think it's going to be good for us. I think we're going to like it being back in those clubs with just the 50 to 100 people, and the 3 band show, and that's just, to me, also the most fun. I'm sure you guys, I'm sure the most fun you've had at shows too are those kind of shows, not the big arenas and stadiums, obviously, too.
Well, and to go off of this point too, if you're a band just doing it for the love of it, you're not really owned, which is a great thing. So I do agree with Matt's point on, maybe it is a good thing that it goes to, back to that specific level, because at a certain point, we got to all admit this too, man. When in the 80s and 90s and whatnot, when labels were throwing money around at bands, those bands were owned. They got told what to play, how to write their songs. So I don't think it was. I think people could probably see through the phoniness. Hiring Desmond Child to write your song for you, that happened a lot, right? So, and maybe it needs to get dialed back again to the purest form, which is get back to writing great songs again. And I if that's the case, I'm all on board with that, because I do think you have so many fucking bands that don't know how to write great songs, and that's killing the genre too. You're just muddying up the waters for actual bands who can write great songs and have yet to be discovered.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good point. Yeah. But, and I think it's just going to come down to the bands themselves it's going to be that whole DIY thing again. They're just going to have to really plug away super hard, harder than ever, obviously, because of the saturated market, because people's attention spans go from, there's so much music out there to consume that, how many times do people now listen to a new album, listen to it more than a few times? Because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, this band's got a new album coming out. Oh, yeah, that's right. Go over here. And you just keep going down the line. And, like I said, gone are the days when you spent that $18 to $20 on a CD, you knew, all right, I'm playing the shit out of this thing because I just spent that money. And even if it's not great on that first spin, I'm going to spin it a bunch of times to at least get a few songs out of that I'm going to at least try to really like, I mean, you'd give albums like 3, 4, 5 chances, back then. Now you give it one spin. Most people don't even give it a second spin if they didn't really, if they didn't catch on really quick when they first heard it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the listening experience is just so different, on top of that too. It's just, everything's just night and day, from what it once was. And I think it's just, I've come to at least finally accept that, okay, it's not going back to the way it once was, and let's embrace the new way it is now and just work with it, and, just at least keep this thing going. And no matter how big or small it is, at least to keep it going.
Now, how does this affect music journalism going forward? Because without, new bands and new whatever, how does this affect, people like us covering and discovering new bands for people and being the filter? How does it affect that?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, I know the reason I'm saying this is because, interviewing Slagle and doing the Bob's now Bandian tribute, I'm talking to a lot of these guys from back, from back then. It's going to go back to, I think, the way it once was when there was those fanzines. Obviously, it's not going to be fanzines, but it's going to be online, blogs, sort of the way it is now, you know. And I think for most, I mean, the thing what's different too. And when I was talking to Slade, I was telling him I kind of brought up a question similar to this, and like, comparing sort of what their time in the early '80s there to what's happening now, and and he says everything's great. I guess he probably has to say that, but at the same time, I think he might be onto something. He would know better than anyone. I mean, he says that there's extreme, enthusiasm and a lot of support with the younger bands and scenes. Now, like I said, I'm not really too tied into a lot of these scenes with kids in their 20s and so forth, but he says it's really solid. But just listen to him and when I was talking to him about the old days, I think it's just going to go back to sort of that kind of way where it's all fan driven, and that's where it's got to be. Think of it. That's where a lot of these, I mean, a genre like that, the early thrash and early LA, metal, '80s metal, that was all done because remember it was just a bunch of kids with a passion for it. They drove that scene to where the majors had no choice but to take notice, and then start signing the bands because it was all just for the love of the music. Like I was asking him, I was saying, you guys, as you saw Tad, and we went to Bob's tribute. I mean, there's such a camaraderie with a lot of those guys. Normally in the music business, you don't see that kind of camaraderie because it's so cutthroat and everyone's just competing with each other. But with those guys, they're so tight knit. And DJ Will was saying it's because none of those bands had any mainstream appeal at the time. So it was just young kids wanting to see their favorite bands do well and succeed, just like we all wanted to when we were kids, when we found those few bands when we first, got into underground metal and we go see them at the clubs, right? You just, every time they get a little bit bigger or they got signed by a label, oh, great. Maybe got picked up by a major eventually, some of them. I mean, you were rooting them on, you were championing them, and I think it's just got to go back to really basic stuff like that, just for the love of the music itself, but will it go back to that? I mean, once again, it's anyone's guess, but in terms of journalism, I think that's where it's got to go, though. I think it's just got to be, it's what is happening now, right? You've got video casts, you've got blogs, you've got podcasts. There's no centralized like hub anymore. There's no MTV for everyone to go and figure out, who's the new best, hair metal band that's coming out on the Sunset Strip. There's no Headbangers Ball to find out who's the next, big thrash bands coming out. Right? There's so many of these little factions everywhere. And, you have like those different factions of fans. You got the radio fans, the Sirius XM fans, and then you got fans like us who don't need any of that shit and we just search on our own. So I think for journalism, it's a good question. Who knows? But, journalism's, like we've been talking about, hasn't been so great for a while anyway. So,
So going off of this point too, how does it affect the clubs putting these on, these events on? If it's going to go back to the underground, that means that means that clubs are going to have to start doing the all ages thing again. They're going to have to start, or again, due to politics and the liability aspect, I don't see that becoming a thing. There's only like a certain level where you can have an all ages venue. You can't have these like dirty killer clubs like Fenders back in the day anymore. I just don't see that happening. So how does the genre grow and as far as the venues go?
Well, I think I could be wrong, but I think that only the certain states have that over 21 age limit thing. I think other cities, other states are more open to that. I don't know. I haven't been out in a long time, so I don't know. But here in Vegas, that ain't ever gonna fucking happen. because this is a gambling city, and every bar has machines in the bar, uh, sections at, you know, gambling, gambling, gambling. That's Vegas. It ain't gonna change here. And when clubs do pop up like that, they don't last long. They'll be open. They'll what, a year and a half, 2 years maybe tops. But the other thing is all these other offshoots of this of metal that I ain't gonna call metal, but metalcore, right? To me, that's not metal. But all these kids gather together in these bands that who knows if they're even good, but they saturate that club so no one else can get in those clubs, and then they fuck it up, and then it closes. Well, now what are you going to do, right? All these other kids, they want to see so and so band from that city actually play to them, but there ain't no way that's happening because they themselves saturate with their scene being as saturated it is saturating those venues.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's you're right, that is a concern. The venues, I mean, but they've always really that's kind of been normal for them to. I just think they're probably not opening and lasting as long as they once did. But I think there's a conscious effort. I think there's a conscious effort. I mean, I think the difference is, now. I mean, it depends on obviously what state you live in. Well, I'll just, obviously use the state I'm in here, California. Yeah, they don't want to see these venues open up for these young kids playing music. Obviously, they don't want to see that. The governments, the local politicians would love to squash that as fast as they can. Which is, yeah, you don't see. I mean, it's the typical places that are open. And if you got to go into San Francisco, which is a bitch to get into, it's expensive to get into there. I mean, to park and stuff. Everyone's cars getting broken into. No one's going to go there and see shows anymore. I mean, I haven't gotten as many as I used to because of that. Um, but yeah, the live thing, man, that's a great question because I don't even know. I mean, it's you just got to hope that there's enough promoters out there. There's enough. What I think it is the young kids, like I said, once again, I'll go back to Bob and those guys. Those guys were in their teens putting out fanzines and putting on shows in their teens, at bars and clubs. Now, of course, now you probably can't do that. Obviously, it's not the 80s and the 70s, but kids in their young 20s can still do that, but they didn't have the drive to do it. That was my main thing is I don't see these kids in their late teens and early 20s driving the scene, starting labels like they used to. I mean, those, back then when those major labels were discovering, whether it was grunge and all those, things, however it was, whatever the big movement was at the time, it was all run by young kids. It wasn't run by adults and dudes in their 40s and 50s. They weren't running it, but they seem to be the only ones that are kind of, I mean, they're hanging around now and they're still running a lot of the stuff. So it is up to the youth to go, you know what, enough with this old man shit. We want to do our own thing here. And, either old people either get on board with us or fuck you. I mean, we're going to do our own thing. They need to have more of that. It's just everything's just too safe. That's just, I mean, I'm hoping that changes with a lot of young kids, but they play too close to the vest. They don't want to take chances. They're afraid to piss people off. Where that's how that scene, the metal scene, got huge is just by doing that. And yes, they had to go from club to club and venue to venue and get kicked out. I mean, of all these places all the time. But that was the lore of it from the fans' point of view and from the youth's point of view is like, oh man, I mean, I heard about that show. It got, it was this huge whatever, and it got closed down. Shit, I got to check out those guys next time they come and play. I mean, yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. And that's an unfortunate thing is that metal, it's more the attitude, I think, that's gone and left. It's just not that F you, fuck you attitude anymore. It's sort of like let's play by the rules now attitude. And that's the one thing I think that's really missing, that is hurting the genre with the youth. It's just they've got to get a little more tougher.
And I think we've been paying way too much attention on the nostalgia bands who lost that, which is probably why we're trying to emulate, them nowadays. So, like, a prime example. So, Metallica's the poster child for all things that I kind of despise right now with this whole thing. And they made their money, and that's it. And it's clearly shown that they just don't give a shit. And so what you're left with is what I call gatekeeping. It's these bands that tour with the same fucking bands over and over again. And I've been saying this for 10 years of my radio career, just saying it over and over again. When's the next generation going to get their opportunity to tour? And it just seems like, again, it's going to have to start from the ground level here, but I'm kind of leaning towards what Matt's saying is I'm kind of glad that it's going to go back to the underground, and I can't wait to see all these old fucking bands just die off. I'm so excited just to get something fresh and new, because it's the same old bullshit that we've been harping about for years. So anyway, I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this when you see the same fucking tours with the same fucking bands for political reasons, mainly.
Yeah, and also like Matt was mentioning, the nostalgia thing, right? So how many bands just keep, like, okay, an example, Ozzy and Judas Priest were supposed to be touring in Europe, right? Two old bands. Like, what's going on, Yeah, there is never going to be, Metallica's never going to let some younger band on, because that younger band has that energy that they used to have, and they don't want that stolen from them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to look like old dudes as these younger guys are fucking jumping around and hopping off amps and all that shit, right? Because what you have to do to get noticed these days is be more insane than the last time you played. So that's not going to happen. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, but it's up to the old bands though to bring down the ladder. That's the whole point to all this. That's what happened. That's what happened for them. And again, what you have now is those bands that had the ladder brought down for them. They're doing what's called gatekeeping. How many fucking Testament and Exodus shows? Well, yes, exactly. But how many Testament and Exodus tours do you fucking see? Jesus Christ, dude. Jesus fucking Christ. And I think the older generation is getting sick of that.
Well, I think they are. I'm sick of it. I think I was telling you about one of the guys we met, Tanner, at the Bob's thing. He was saying the same thing. Obviously, he's from up here. He was saying, I can't go see another Testament Exodus thing. I can't do it. It's, I listen, I know part of it is just the way the music business is right now. No, it's part of it. Part of it is obviously promoters and the guarantees and all that stuff. But yeah, look, they could be doing who are they taking out? They're taking out Hatred. They're taking out, and of course, that's Zetro's son's band. So it's like, it's nepotism. It's all over the place, with especially those thrash bands here from the Bay Area. It's all nepotism. It's their kids. It's obviously Metallica. I mean, like I said, we see all the time. We see Slipknot with Corey Taylor's, and Clown's son's band. I mean, they're part of the club, man. I've been saying this for a long time. Those bands are part of the big club, like George Carlin, and you ain't in it. They're in that club. Metallica and Slipknot are in that fucking club. And so I don't hear anybody tell me that they're not, or they like I said, they are not. It's not even so much they forgot where they came from. They obviously did. It's like they don't care where they came from, and that's what's probably, I think, even more upsetting to me. Is, I'm not saying, look, they got to go out and tour and take 3, bands out that no one's heard of before. I'm not saying that, but there's some bands that have made noise, that do make noise here and there, and to take 1 or 2 of them out, they can do that. They've got the to do that for the sake of the genre. They always claim Metallica to be the ambassadors of fucking metal. How are you being ambassador of metal when you're like, I mean, you're touring with freaking, like I said, either
Lady Gaga,
band, yeah, or exactly doing teaming up with Lady Gaga and doing freaking
Pantera, or fucking, yeah.
It's a joke to me. They just that's why I don't even want to, like, when I hear Metallica, it's just, when people just clamor about, oh, Metallica, I can't wait to see them, blah blah blah, man. I just turn away and don't even take notice
Mm.
because I'm so, yeah, like I said, yeah, I'm it boils my blood. It really does, And like I said, part of me sees where some of the bands are coming from. I know the business is different. I know that you've got to do things a little differently, but none of them are even talking about new bands. And I understand. Like, look, a lot of times, a lot of older musicians, older fans don't relate to younger people. That's just human nature. You know what I mean? Like someone in their 50s, it's going to be hard to relate to some young kid in his early to mid 20s, musically and just in general, in every most facets of life. But you said they know that they've been there at one point. I mean, Metallica needed some help. They needed, especially these days when back then there were labels that tons of independent labels. There was ways that independent labels and bands could make a career doing it, which now you can't. I mean, you barely can't. You just there's hardly any bands that make money going out and touring, and that's my thing too. Is I don't even think we're going to be seeing touring much after a while. You're going to see probably that's going to stop. But I've been saying that. I really think for young bands, what they need to do is you look at your immediate region you're in, and there's 3 or 4 cities or towns that have a decent metal scene around them. You focus in like they used to do. Just make that your home base. Keep it small. Instead of thinking and dreaming big and to play the big venues and play the world. Just worry about your region and being the stars in that area, because that's how it used to start for those bands. They were mega in certain cities, certain regions. No one heard of them outside those regions, but God, they were huge in there, and that's how they got noticed. And I think it's just once again, it's just got to go back to that basic, old school way of just doing it for the love of music. The community thing needs to be back. I think because of politics, the metal community is so divided because of all the politics. You've got these fucking stupid sites like Metal Sucks and Metal Injection just fanning the flames of activism left and right, and it's not about music. So it's up to the young fans to get off the freaking politic train and make it about music and start coming together again in the community. I mean, no, I'm sure you guys, when you grew up going to your shows, no one talked to give a shit about politics and what party were for and everything like that. You didn't care about that stuff. You just cared about the music and having a community, having some friends and bonding over it, man. Simple as that. So,
Do you think it's done on purpose nowadays, though? Do you think it's done on purpose? Where because metal it promotes individuality, and I think that's really bad for the establishment. And so, to me, this is just my thinking, and I could be completely wrong, but I'm gonna say it out there because it's my fucking show. But I really feel that uh, thanks to this kind of thinking, it needs to kind of I don't know. It needs to stop. I think we need to stop letting the elite control our behavior in terms of what shows to go to, what bands to see. Because all you're seeing on these metal sites are these big name bands touring with these big name bands. So if we ignore that and focus more only on new bands, because there are great new bands that write great songs, but it's just we all seem to be shifting our focus and letting the magazines dictate what we listen to, and that's just old bands, and it needs to stop. No? Yes? No? Maybe so. I'm talking to myself here.
Yeah,
no,
yeah. But I will
And
say
how do
this too. This also has a big part too. And maybe this is my opinion, but this is to me fucking irritating. So when you hear all these newer bands that are coming out, we're going to use the new wave of traditional heavy metal as a guide. Every fucking one of those bands have this pop aspect to them. There's these one dude singing, and now all of a sudden it gets to this pre-chorus, and there's 8 vocals, and it sissifies the music. Metal's supposed to be fucking dangerous, supposed to be on the edge, right? And now all of a sudden I'm getting heavy metal and Britney Spears in the same band, right? And you're not pushing that envelope. That's another thing that happened in the early days, metal pushed an envelope, whether it was there was always an anger about it. Politicians hated it, parents hated it, everybody in the world hated it except uh, the 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 fans themselves, the
Mhm.
bands and the bands being fans of each other, right? Sure, there was competition, but it was all supportive. Nowadays, it's not like that at all. At all. Bands don't support other bands. There's such a wide variety of multi genres within the main genre, right? So, symphonic metal, right? And I know this is going off on tangents, but certain styles I can't listen to
Mhm.
because it doesn't appeal to me, right? But then that's what people are looking at, right? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Well, it's
And
supposed to
so
appeal to a
that's
wide
how I'm
variety.
seeing it. They're not pushing any envelope to make that scene better, to help it grow. They're saturating every aspect of it, and
Mhm.
it's suffocating itself within itself. And
Yeah.
that's another aspect.
Yeah.
You you can't you can't have pop sensibilities in metal and expect metal to survive. No.
That's a good
Now it's
point.
pop band. Now it's a pop group. Now you're a boy band, right?
Mhm.
Might as well just be a boy band. Fuck.
I disagree. I disagree with that point, and here's why. Because the 1980s, that was all the bands that you're talking about. They were literally pop bands playing rock. That's literally so, and those bands are still relevant today. So I guess
Weren't multi-layering vocals like that. That
Yeah.
was that was
I-
Cyndi Lauper. That was Madonna. That was Wham. That was Culture Club. Those kind of bands did that, not metal, right? All of a sudden, it just became acceptable to
yeah.
who?
Look. Yeah.
Why?
Mhm. Yeah. No, I agree. See, I agree with Shannon because the 80s bands. I mean, yeah, you could say, of course, they had some. There was some pop in. I would say more of the marketing, how they and maybe they didn't play the super type of heavy metal. But remember, that stuff was sleazy, man. That was all about, partying and fucking and everything.
yeah,
So it wasn't like you could say it was pop, but it pushed it once again, it pushed the envelope, it pushed those boundaries. It was dangerous. I mean, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, even though we might think, oh, it's cheesy stuff, that was still I was pushing an envelope in terms of lyrically and what they represented. I mean, that was all about, decadence and excess.
Mhm.
Where now there's not. I mean, like you said, what are they singing about? You singing about
Who knows?
Trump or Biden or whatever? I mean, like it's like, I mean, they're singing about whatever they see on TV. They're not singing about like what's really going on in their lives. I mean, once again, I mean, it's just different, with the social media with these kids. And I think that's part of the disconnect is just that these kids are just growing up so differently than a lot of the older heads, in terms of like just social media itself. That and alone and how people socialize. Remember back in the day when you were a young metal fan and you're going to a show. I mean, you weren't sitting there on your phone and communicating with people that way. You had to get your ass up off the freaking couch, go to that show, start talking to some people at the show. I mean, you had to go to the record stores and you met people that way. That's how you communicate, was face to face communication. These days you have like, you have these online, these virtual scenes, and that's how a lot of people meet that way. And I think it's fine. It's convenient and stuff. But once again, it's a lot of people just don't want to take it a step further. They'd rather just sit there on their phone and communicate with people or do things just this way. They don't want to get out and like I said, and they're not pushing the envelope because exactly they're too afraid, these kids these days. You know what I mean? They don't have I guess the guts to push the envelope and to tell the the elites and the whoever's to go fuck themselves. There's no more D. Snyder's, with the whole PMRC stuff. Not that was a big deal anyway, but once again, it was at least drawing. Once again, remember when they put the whole explicit lyric stickers on the CDs? That they came up with this great thing. Well, that actually made that sell even more. And that's the thing, because people want that. People are dying for that. I think most metal fans. I can't wait to see some young metal band come out, balls to the wall, telling every politician to go screw themselves, telling every zine or everything online that they suck because they're not focused on music, that they're focused on activism. I want to see bands have a scene that they come out and start getting loud. Now the thing is, what they think is they're afraid to do it now because they're afraid of what's going to happen. They're going to get canceled, right? They're going to get censored. So they don't have a voice that way. So that's the thing, is everyone's voice now is now through this. It's not out there. And so that's the difference too. You can control the voice in you. That's why, not to get into government politics stuff, but that's why they want it that way, so they can control it. But it's not done out there. People only go to this out here, but it starts through this before they go to that. And so I think that is the main issue. It's just that people are afraid because they don't want to get canceled. They don't want to get their Facebook and Twitter and Instagram shut down and their YouTube channels shut down and shadow banned. And it does happen. So they have to toe the line, or they say nothing. And the ones that say quiet, they say nothing. But then, of course, you've got all those other bands who were all for that now running the show. And no one can retort. No one can go back at them. You can't spew facts, and you can't debate them because they won't let it happen online. They'll just cancel you and censor you. So it's a difficult place too. One thing is we got to give these younger kids. It's tougher than what we dealt with. Than what they're going through now. It's nothing that we've ever known.
I think we also need other publication companies to replace the Metal Sucks of the world and not take corporate money. So we need to all figure. There has to be a way to fucking do this, to where you could have a publication company that is supported by the masses, that's not owned by fucking corporate money. And that's where everything gets screwed up. And so you're seeing a result of that as well. People are afraid to talk. Fuck those people. You know what I mean? It's the whole thing of that. All these publication companies get their money from the same people, and they're controlled that way, to where they don't allow other alternative voices to be heard by the masses, because the elite, it's done on purpose. And I think people need to fucking wake up.
Yeah, look, that's easier said than done, though, right? You're right. The money is not given to anyone who's going to tell establishment or whatever to go fuck themselves. No, it's going to be like, we'll give you money if you you walk the line, you toe the line, and you're going to be all right. But if you don't, we're going to cancel. You're going to be censored and canceled. And so people are just. Once again, it's the fear, But once again, like we've said about metal. Metal used to be fearless. That was the whole point of it. Now, not so much. Then the ones who are fearless are the ones who are just obviously echoing what the people with the money want to get. Throw at them. Like you said, if you look at all, I'll just tell you this, just from my, doing the skull sessions and seeing, some of the people that were, connected with Bob, and seeing some of the things he'd shown me. Most of these people in this industry, man, are that's the way they are. They're all about the censoring. They're all about that stuff, and they're the ones that are obviously they've been in the scene. It's so many of them. It's almost like it's very rare that aren't any. It's very rare that there's anybody that isn't, and so it's a wall to break through. It's just going to come from. It's probably going to come. It's going to come from like a band or two that's got already some notoriety, that's doing pretty well, that comes out and says, you know what, we're willing to sacrifice our record deal, whatever it is, to take a stand here and to say, you know what, no, F you all. You know what I mean? We're standing up for this. You've had a couple of during the pandemic, you had some musicians, like established musicians, that sort of kind of did that. And what did they have to do? They wound up coming back and apologizing and walking back, because their lawyers and all their managers and all their people, their handlers are like, yo, dude, what are you doing? You commit career suicide right now if you don't go out there and you don't apologize for that. You know what I mean? Because they're going to censor you and cancel you. And there's no one big enough that's got the balls to do it. The only people you got doing it are older, some of the older musicians that, they're okay anyway. They're fine. They don't need to, they're not really losing anything. Everyone knows they already like that by that point, whether it's a Ted Nugent or something, whoever it is that's a little against the grain, you know what I mean? That, or for the other side, it could be whoever. But bottom line is you need people with some status to stand up and be the voice of it. But once again, are they willing to do it? Are you going to get 4 or 5 guys to agree on that? Probably not. You might get 1 or 2. But 4 or 5 guys to say, you know what, we're going to sacrifice our career for the betterment of the young crowd of musicians and metal, they're not going to do that. And that's why you're seeing all the nepotism. I mean, bottom line.
Yeah, and I think this is a good place to stop, man. That's a fair point, and hopefully things change, man. I really hope they do, and it's you know it until then we're gonna keep doing our thing and keep promoting new bands and just having fun while we're still here, living on Earth. This is all. All we can do is control our inner circle, and hopefully that grows and spawns, that seed to the next, plant to grow the tree and then a forest after that. So we'll see.
Yeah, like you
That's
said,
all it
even
is.
if we just got a whole row, a park of trees, man, for metal, I'm okay with that. I've just come to the point where it's like, you know what, I'm accepting certain things the way they are. Like you said, do our best to see if we can do our part to push the boundaries and the envelope a little farther, and then that's all we can do. It's all, like I said, it's all we can control. But the key word is to have fun, like you said, while we're doing it. And I think, I mean, it's great. I mean, you're still doing your stuff, Tanner and Shannon's get ready to go, out with Avenger of Blood. I mean, that's what it's all about. You know what I mean? And just keep doing it and have fun with it. And that's really it.
Yeah, exactly. And at bottom line, if you ain't having fun, you ain't doing it right. So, and what's nice is you can shift your focus instead of getting mad at what is essentially the inevitable for the genre. We can shift our focus on other aspects within our own lives. So that's what we do. But Matt, thank you so much again for coming on. I really do appreciate a moment of your time, and hopefully we can do, more and more of these. It's always like a battle here, going up against one another with our points.
It's a friendly battle. It's a
Yeah.
friendly, bantering and, good discussions. Like I said, it's yeah. Thank you guys for once again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and it was nice to meet you formally in person.
Yes, that
So.
was nice.
So no more $40 parking, but it was nice to see you at Bob's memorial service. Now, what do you have coming up for Shockwaves or Aftershocks that you're getting ready to do for the? Can we even mention the Bob Nobandian tribute?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's already out there. Yeah, so we're doing the Skull Session Salute. It's basically a series that I'm doing. I mean, Chris Aiken is going to be doing some of the interviews with me as well. And we're talking to a lot of the guys from the 80s, from the LA metal scene, the metal blades, not the hair metal scene obviously, but the metal scene. Where it all started. They're obviously all of Bob's inner circle, his buddies from years. We're doing interviews, just talking about Bob, talking about the old days from the 80s and just how all that stuff spawned and how it just grew. And it's great just to hear these guys talk about their stories, obviously about Bob and how important he was, but just in general, kind of like a little bit we were talking about today, just how the scene grew and how it became what it eventually became. So yeah, Skull Session Salute. We had David Elvison on already last week. This coming week we've got John Gallagher from Raven. He's he's our next one up. Like I said, we've talked to a bunch of other people like Brian Slagle and some of Bob's friends who've been in the music business that people might not know of yet. But there's going to be a bunch of interviews with some of the musicians and some of the players that were in that scene, and that's going to be a series that we're doing. And then once that's finished, we're going to release a official tribute video to Bob. That all these people, all these important figures, they give their sort of, they talk a little bit about him and how important he was. And, as people who don't know Bob Nalbandian, I mean, he was just one of a kind individual who did so much for that scene. And, and just as a person, he was just an amazing individual, just as a person. So we're just trying to keep his legacy alive. We're going to be putting up an archive channel that has all his, not just the Skull Sessions, but the episodes we do. We're going to have his tribute up there. We're going to have his T Radio Vs up there as well. Just have one-stop spots for anybody that wants to go check out all Bob's work, because he really was such a amazing historian too of the genre, going back to its infancy. Obviously all you got to do is take a look at those documentaries he put out, and that'll show you everything that he knows. He was a walking encyclopedia. So yeah, so we got that going on, and hopefully that video, the tribute video, should be out early spring.
Now, are you gonna also put up the old Road Runner skull sessions because I have not
Yep.
heard these. So
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right,
we're gonna
that'll-
re-release each one. I'm gonna do that. We're gonna probably put one up each week. There was a bunch of those. I forget how many exactly there were. Those 70 or 80 of those. So so those are great ones. Just hearing those old stories. Obviously, it's pretty old school with the Roadrunner records thing on there, and just the audio was very shitty, and it was, like I said, this is 2007, so obviously the technology wasn't as good back then, but some real big names on those ones too. And it's just great stories, just hearing about those days. Like I said, it almost gets you a little kind of down when you hear them, and then you think of what's going on today, because it was just so exciting and organic, and just such this new thing that all these guys rallied around. And like I said, there was just great camaraderie with all of them, and so there's just it's great to listen to those. Just to, if you some piece of history of metal history and hard rock history from the late 70s and early 80s, man. Those skull sessions say it all. So yeah, we'll be reposting those in early spring as well, doing about one a week as well. Yeah.
Shannon, what do you have coming up, man? Let's hear what Avenger Blood is cooking.
I'm just working on new songs and new recordings, keeping ourselves busy.
And any
That's
shows?
about it. Just the one that the Blades of Steel 3 Metal Fest in Madison, Wisconsin, with some really killer bands: Flotsam and Jetsam, Exciter, Artillery, Blind Illusion.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm stoked about it. Really
It's a great
stoked.
lineup. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this is a great place to stop. I want to thank you both for coming on, and again, we'll do this many more times. But for another episode of Poppets Corner, guys, we're out of here. Cheers.